One day, Biscuit's family was going on a very special trip. They were going camping. So they packed up the car with tents and sleeping bags and flashlights and chairs and coolers and tables and a marshmallow roaster and some yummy dog food for Biscuit. Biscuit had never been camping before. He didn't really know what to expect. But one thing he did know was that anything could happen and anything might be a little bit magical. And for Biscuit, every day was an exciting opportunity to make new discoveries and learn new things. When they got to the campground, Biscuit immediately started dragging the sleeping bags toward the woods, wagging his whole rear end. "We gotta put this stuff somewhere," he said with a little bark. So he dragged those sleeping bags all the way to a clearing and plopped them down in the middle. "Perfect," he said with a lick of his chops. But then he saw some sticks nearby and thought, "HMM, maybe we should put these here instead." And off he went dragging the sleeping bags again, sniffing every stick, and logged along the way. Finally, they decided to set up camp, and Biscuit liked to help, too. So he stood very still while people put the tent together. And even though he tried very hard, he couldn't help but leave a few little paw prints on the tent right before they finished. But no one could see them except for Biscuit. It was starting to get dark, and Biscuit looked up. "What are those?" he asked with wide eyes. There were so many shiny twinkly lights up there. "Stars," whispered a little girl, and Biscuit looked back at her with big eyes that stars. Stars everywhere. He had never seen so many stars before. "I want to go play with them," he said, and she giggled. "You can't play with the stars, silly." But Biscuit didn't listen. Instead, he started chasing them across the sky. He chased them behind a tree, and then round the tent, and even under a bush. But he couldn't catch them. Just when he thought he'd given up, he saw something fall from the sky. "Gotcha!" he barked and ran after it. But when he reached it, he realized it wasn't a star at all. It was a tiny glowing bug flying round in circles. "A tiny star on the ground," he said happily. He pounced and nipped at the little bug, but it flew away from him every time he got too close. And Biscuit just kept chasing, and the game continued for a while, until suddenly the bug landed on Biscuit's nose, and he sneezed. "Achoo," he said, and the bug flew away and landed on another nose, the noses of one of the people there. "Ow," she said, and swatted at it. "Leave me alone, you little bugger," she said. And then she walked off to put something else together. And Biscuit sniffed the air, and it smelled like marshmallows. He loved marshmallows. So he toddled over to where she'd been sitting and stuck his head in the bag. "Hello," he said. "Can I have a marshmallow?" She came back with a smile and a handful of gooey marshmallows. "Sure," she said, tossing one up in the air. And Biscuit caught it right on his tongue. The moment that marshmallow touched him, he felt like he was on fire. "Hot, hot, hot," he barked and shook his head wildly. And as he did, he accidentally knocked the entire bag of marshmallows out of the girl's hands. Marshmallows bounced and rolled everywhere. "Oops," said Biscuit, licking his chops. And of course, he ate as many as he could, but there were so many. He couldn't eat them all. So he started to bury them. He dug a hole and buried a marshmallow. He dug another hole and buried another marshmallow. He kept doing this until he had buried all the marshmallows. Then he looked up. "Hey," he said, "wanna help me dig up my treasure?" The girl smiled and nodded. So they dug and dug and dug until they found the marshmallows. She took one and toasted it on a stick. "Here," she said, handing it to Biscuit. And he took it gently this time. This marshmallow tasted like sweet caramel. "It tastes like sunshine," he said. And they sat there eating marshmallows and making silly faces at each other until it was time to go to sleep. Everyone squeezed into the tent, including Biscuit, of course. He snuggled up next to the girl and closed his eyes. For a moment, he imagined he was a brave knight guarding a princess in a faraway land. He imagined that the tent was a castle and the marshmallows were magical jewels. He imagined that the bugs outside the tent were dragons trying to fly in and steal his treasure. But they couldn't get in because Sir Biscuit, the brave, was protecting the princess. And then he heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the sound of gentle snores coming from the princess. So he wagged his tail slowly, careful not to wake her, and soon enough, he was fast asleep, too. But then suddenly, zip, the tent flap opened all by itself. Biscuit woke up and stretched. He didn't mean to wake the princess, but it was such a beautiful night. And besides, he needed to go potty. So he wriggled out of the tent and tiptoed past the sleeping people. He had to pee, and when he was done, he shook his butt and then looked around. Well, it was so dark, and all those shiny twinkly lights were out tonight. Where had they gone? He wondered. Then he heard a funny buzzing sound, and he looked up. There were all those tiny glowing bugs flying in circles. The stars have come down to earth, he said happily, and he chased after them, yipping and leaping until he came back to the tent. He poked his head inside. Come play with me, he whispered. But the princess was still sleeping, so he went back outside. He walked over to the fire pit and looked in. The fire had burned out, and only a few embers glowed in the darkness. But as he stood there, he felt something warm tickle his whiskers. He jumped back and landed right inside the marshmallow bag. It was empty, of course, because they'd eaten all the marshmallows. But it smelled faintly of sugar and smoke, so Biscuit laughed at it. Yum, yum, and that made the fireflies follow him round like he was a glowing puppy lantern. He ran, and they flew. He hid, and they buzzed, and he was very, very happy. Finally, it was time for bed. So everyone crawled into the tent again, but Biscuit stayed outside. He wanted to watch the bugs dancing in the darkness just a little bit longer, but it was getting cold, and when he looked in the tent, he saw that the princess was still sleeping, her mouth open just a tiny bit. So Biscuit closed the tent flap gently with his nose and curled up by the campfire's glow. In the morning, they all woke up and started packing up their stuff. Biscuit helped, of course, by sniffing every stick and log and leaf and rock and flower and bird and bug along the way. And when they finally left the campground, he looked back one last time. He'd had the best adventure ever. He'd met magical bugs and eaten marshmallow paws and played with fireflies and guarded a princess and peed in the woods. It had been a wonderful night, and he couldn't wait to tell his friends all about it.